Good day, third year students. Let's continue the poem My Last Duchess by Robert Browning. Sir, it was all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech or blush at least. So the Duke continues to criticize the nature of his previous wife, his previous Duchess, and says, Sir, it was all one. It was all one for her. My favour at her breast. My favour means a gift or a precious piece of jewelry given to her by the Duke. He says she could not differentiate between the gifts given by me and some ordinary gifts from others. It was all same for her. She equally appreciated other things such as the dropping of the daylight in the west, the setting of the sun, the bough of cherries some officious fool broke in the orchard for her. If someone brought her a branch of cherries from the orchard, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, the white mule on which she rode around the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech or blush at least. So she liked all these things as much as she liked the things from the Duke. So he was irritated at the fact that she didn't seem to see the value in what he gave to her, and she considered his expensive gifts equal to petty things and to other simple pleasures she enjoyed, like riding on the horse, watching the sun going down, and things like that. All and each would draw from her alike the approving speech or blush at least. She approved. She liked other simple things as much as she liked things from the Duke, or she blushed at least. Next he says, she thanked man, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. He says, she thanked man, and it was good. I didn't mind that. There was nothing wrong in it. But thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. But the manner in which she used to thank people seemed to imply that as if she was ranking my gift of a 900-year-old name with anybody's gift. 900-year-old name. He is talking about his connection to a long standing aristocratic family with power and prestige. He is a royal person having a family history of nearly 1,000 years. So, what he means to say that is by marrying his last duchess, he had gifted her his prestigious royal name and lineage, which possibly she didn't have. But didn't she seem she didn't seem to give precious gift his precious gift of 900-year-old name enough importance, and this was unacceptable to him. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling? Now he puts a rhetorical question and says, who would actually put down himself in this type of trifling? Trifling means petty things, in unnecessary, unimportant things. Who would actually put down himself in this type of petty things? He says, I could have pointed out her faults, but then it could be trifling for him beneath his dignity. Even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one and say, just this or that in you disgust me, here you miss or there exceed the mark. He says, even if you had skill in speech, you can talk impressively, which I don't have, he says, to make your will quite clear to such a one and say just this or that in you disgust me. To explain, to make your will, to explain what you want and say just this or that in you disgust me, that this characteristics of yours disgust me, or here you miss or there exceed the mark. Here you fail to do something, or there exceed the mark, or there you did too much. And if she let herself be lessened so, nor plainly set her wits to yours. And if she had disciplined, she had lessened herself so, she had taught herself, she had allowed herself to change her opinions according to mine, according to yours, forsooth, and made excuse, even then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. He says, even then, if she had allowed herself to change her behavior and made excuse, felt sorry for her behavior, even then it would be like stooping, like going down to her level, and I choose never to stoop. Now, this is a very emphatic statement and very suggestive of his true personality full of arrogance and snobbery. This becomes quite clear why didn't he correct his wife's mistakes when she was clueless about her so-called faults. He says he could have gone to the Duchess and pointed out her faults to her, but then it would have meant bowing down to a wife, which was something he considers below his dignity. I choose never to stoop. And being a duke, and that too with full of arrogance, he refuses to stoop down. Next he says, "Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whenever I passed her. But who passed without much the same smile?" He is admitting here to the envoy that though no doubt she smiled whenever I passed by her, but who passed without much the same smile? But the same smile was given to her to all the people who happened to pass by her. So there was nothing special in the smile she gave to me. She pretty much smiled at everyone in the same way. This grew, I gave commands, and then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. This grew. Now, this is a very sad part of the poem. Duke says, this grew. That attitude, her attitude of general appreciation of each and everything got increased by the time. It got worse and he couldn't take it anymore. So what did he do then? He says, this grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. He gave commands. He gave such commands that made all her smiles stop together. Now, this is a cryptic statement. What did he exactly do with the Duchess? Did he get her killed, or did he locked her up as a punishment? Nothing is clear with this line, but most probably he got her killed. And there she stands as if alive. Won't you please you rise? We will meet the company below then. And imagine how ruthless, how cruel it was on the Duke's part that he didn't even bother to tell the poor woman what was her fault. Why was she being punished? This action of Duke reveals how pitiless, how insensitive kind of person he is. There she stands as if alive. Will't please you rise? We will meet the company below then. And once again, he points at the painting in which the Duchess stands as if alive, maybe alive only in painting. Will't please you rise? We will meet the company below then. In the earlier part of the poem, he asks the envoy to sit down. Now he is telling him to get up. So together they can go downstairs to meet company, probably some other people downstairs. I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed. I repeat. Now, through these lines, we get to know that the silent listener is the Count's messenger, who is trying to arrange marriage between the Duke and the Count's daughter. He says, I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence. Munificence means generosity, kindness. So after telling the story of his previous Duchess, he returns to the topic of his marriage with the Count's daughter. He says that I know about your Count's wealth and generosity. So his generosity is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed. So his generosity is ample warrant. Ample warrant means enough guarantee that all his claims regarding dowry will be given. So he is expecting a reasonable dowry from the Count. Though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. But he also clarifies and says, I had avowed, as I had stated before, as I had said before, that Count's beautiful daughter is the main object, is the main reason of this marriage. So the Duke is greedy too. Though he tries to hide his greed with his smooth talk, but it's quite clear that he is a greedy person. Nay, we'll go together down, sir. Notice Neptune, thou taming a sea-horse, though thought a rarity which Claus of Innsbruck cast in bronze for me. Notice Neptune. While going down, he attracts the envoy's attention to a bronze statue of Neptune. Neptune is a Roman sea god, and in that statue he is taming a seahorse. And he tells him that this statue was specially made for him by an artist named Claus from the city Innsbruck. Now, this statue of Neptune taming a seahorse is very symbolic. And the Duke had a definite purpose in his mind when he shows it to the envoy. Neptune symbolizes the Duke, and the seahorse symbolizes his future Duchess that he would get. So, by showing this statue to the envoy, he is indirectly telling him that he wishes to tame his future wife, control his future wife to do whatever he wishes her to do. He would control her as Neptune is controlling the seahorse. This also suggests if his future wife does not act according to his wishes, then she might also get punished like his previous wife. So this all makes sense. Why did the Duke talk about his last Duchess to the envoy? We realize that he was giving hints about his expectations from his new would-be Duchess. What she should do and what she should not. She should instinctively know what pleases him and what not. So, knowingly or unknowingly, he shows himself in a negative light. He is possessive, he is greedy, he is dominating, he is cunning. In all, he is someone who likes to control and guide people around him. So, Browning in this poem has done a fine psychological study of a sinister character like the Duke of Ferrara. So, students, the poem ends here, and I hope you understood. Thank you so much.